And so when we're transferring between accounts and it doesn't affect the bottom line, we have to come and make the presentation to you for approval.
Thanks.
The next is the investment report. I wish I could tell you we're still with higher rates, but we're not. 34,174,720 in our portfolio. PFC now is 31,880. This before the refunding, this was 1,021,000, which we just saw in the amendment. Now it's only 31,000 because we had the refunding and be able to reduce our rates and not pay as much interest. Basically, we have 71% of our monies in investment pools, whether it be TexPool, Lone Star, TechStart, or JP Morgan Chase. The ones at 31,000 is also Bank of Texas and some at JP Morgan Chase. This is from a year ago. The difference between when we were in 2014 from a year ago exactly today, we're 1,900,000 more in terms of our portfolio, so 7% more in our liquidity than a year ago. 30 million is basically overnight or overnight funds. We've earned 11,981 and $17 in the PFC fund, and earning 0.067, and the benchmark is 0.060. And here's a historical outlook on the interest rates, and hopefully they'll move a little bit more in the future, but we're still at below 1%.
Any questions? No questions? Thank you, Jesus. Okay, so now we move to our action items. Are there any reserves for our action items? Consensus agenda.
6A1, 6A2, 6C1, 6C6, That's all I've got.
Okay. Does anyone else have any? Okay, hearing none, we're going to have a vote on our action consensus items, withholding 6A1, 6A2, 6C1, 6C6. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Motion.
I'm sorry. Do I have a motion?
I move.
Okay. Second? Have a second? Okay, now we'll take it. All those in favor of our action consensus items 6A through 6D. Withholding 6A1, 6A2, 6C1, 6C6. Signify by saying aye.
Say I raise hand.
Okay, hands aye. Okay, so it passes. Okay, now we move to 6A1. Got a motion? Got a second? Got a second? I'll second. Okay, any discussion?
I'd like to get more information about the concerns Colleen Vera brought up about the unemployed stipends. And I I'm not sure if this is on this item, but the $73,000 for subsidy of records management.
We have the information regarding those stipends on Fund 240, and that's for the alternative certification program. It's a fee reimbursement to the participant. It's a grant that we receive that basically reimburses the participant $1,200, and so once they participate, then they fulfill the requirements, they get a reimbursement from the grant. The grant allows for that, and it's basically for that to provide an incentive to individuals that want to get their certification.
Well, who does that come from?
The federal government. It's a federal grant.
How much of that, I mean, what are their expenses in that program, and how much of that covers those expenses? Basically, you have reimbursement in $3,600 for fees paid by the participant, and so they're going to, that's $2,200 covers that.
Right. This is a federal grant that we have with the U.S. Department of Education as a transition to teaching, and it allows individuals to get their teacher certification, and they receive reimbursement for the fees that they pay to get certified. So they currently pay $44,650 to get certified. That's a full certification fee, and they get a partial reimbursement, that's 70% back. In return, what they do is they commit to work for at least 3 full years as teachers of credit in high-need school district and high-need schools.
So these stipends do not cover the full amount that they get back?
Correct, and just a partial reimbursement.
Okay. At what point do they get the rest of that money?
They actually don't get all the money right away. It's a 3-year reimbursement, so they get a third of it at the end of their first year of teaching, another third during the second year, and another third during the third year. So it's spread out over 3 years.
Right. Thank
So
you.
it's a form of a retention, so we keep them in a profession.
Okay. Any other discussion?
What about the subsidy for records management? Or is that on the budget amendment report?
Yes, that's there is a subsidy, but basically that is to pay for our internal records management, because we get charged also records management fees as well. And so
We charge ourselves fees?
Yeah, we have fees that we keep all the records there. And so there's a partially that all our divisions utilize the records management as well. In addition to do that, the portion that there is a subsidy is only for those within the county. And so the fees that are charged outside of the county are not, there's no subsidy for those. Now, the division has a overall subsidy, but not for the grant, not for the contract that are not in the county.
All right.
Is that just schools that get a subsidy or all in county?
Schools, for schools. And then HCDE as well, because we utilize the service. Our grants and business services, we put all our records there, and so we utilize the service from our internal.
My other question about this agenda item is the $35,000 to Moat Casey.
That's the fee, but based on the contract that we went into last year to prepare the annual report. We had not been billed for that, and so we received a bill and we processed it for this particular month. Doesn't mean that this month is where the services were rendered. They were rendered before that.
Do you know how much we've paid them in total?
That is the only payment we've had here today.
So far, $35,000 in total.
Are there any other questions regarding item 6A1? Hearing none, if you would please signify by voting for the July disbursement report by a raise of hands. And passes 5-0. 6A2, monthly budget amendment report. Do I have a motion? I'll move. Do we have a second? Okay, no motion. And we'll move on to, 6C1. Consider approval ratification of the following interlocal contracts. HCDE Governmental Services with Beatrice Mays Institute, Houston, Texas. Galveston County, my microphone isn't on, so I'm not doing it with that.
No, I just turned it on just a minute ago, but it is on now. And I can't get it to go on.
What happened? There. Galveston County WCID number 1, Dickinson, Texas. Hill County Bible Church, Pflugerville, Texas. Lindsay ISD, Lindsay, Texas. Meals on Wheels and More, Austin, Texas. Munster ISD, Munster, Texas. Orange County, Orange, Texas. San Antonio Little Theater Incorporated, San Antonio, Texas. Southwest Preparatory School District, San Antonio, Texas. Travis County Healthcare Districts, DBA, Central Health, Austin, Texas. And City of Venus, Texas. Do I have a motion?
Is there a motion for consensus item 6C1? Remember, just making a motion on the item doesn't mean you're voting for it. You're moving for discussion on the item. So there can be no discussion on the item and a vote on the item without a motion on the item. So you can move in second without saying you're in favor of the item.
So is there a motion for 6C1? Okay. Diane, is there a second? I'll second. Okay, is there any discussion on 6C1?
Can somebody tell us what some of these contracts are about? For instance, the Travis County Healthcare Districts, doing business as the Central Health.
All these entities on here are joining Harris County to an interlocal contract to access the Choice Partners contract that we have available. Many of these are joining with no immediate need. They just join so the contracts are in place when they need to access them.
Trying to control it now.
Okay, all right.
And some of these entities have an immediate need and may be accessing some of our contracts immediately, but by joining through the interlocal, they have access to all the Choice Partners contracts. So in your specific case, the Travis County Health District, I believe that one was joined through our copier contract, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going to find out for sure for you, let you know, but which is one of our vendors, Dayhill. They sell copiers and lease copiers. And so this entity is joining our co-op to access that contract immediately, but they do have access to any contracts we make available. So this is going to be revenue coming back to Harris County eventually. But we're not spending any money with any of these entities.
Thank you.
Would you repeat that one last time, what you just said?
I believe this is revenue coming back to HCDE, but we're not spending any money with any of these entities. Our vendors are out there working for us.
What about the Mills on Wheels out of Austin? Is that just at Austin, or is that more than Austin?
That particular local was just for their Austin location. I think each location is separate in how they're run, but and I believe that one was also for our copier contract with Dayhill. Same instance.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we're going to vote on 6C1. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? It carries 3-1.
Madam President, I would like to go back to action item A6A2. We didn't have any action on that. I don't know. I would like to seek our legal counsel on that. Did that fail due to a lack of a motion? I think we had a motion and not a second.
There wasn't a motion, second.
That's correct. So when you make a motion and you're just moving to discuss the item, you're not moving to actually vote on the item. It doesn't indicate a preference to agree with the item. And so, if this board desires discussion on this agenda item that the administration recommended, it would be my recommendation that, since it was pulled from consent, there seems to be an indication that discussion is warranted, that the board have a motion and a second, and then discuss the item for clarification.
Okay, but minus a second to the motion?
That's a good question. Minus the second to the motion, the item fails, which means you cannot approve whatever the item is, so you would not be approving your monthly budget amendment report, which could cause impact to administration, and you might, as a board, want to at least second the motion to see what that impact would be.
Well, prior to that, I would ask Dr. Mesqua to articulate what the impact of no action on item 682 would be to the organization.
Right. That would be the fact that some of our, again, our grants, we're amending the be able to spend, so we have no money in the line items to be able to spend. The majority of these are grants. The larger one on the debt service fund, that's basically the refunding that you previously approved before. We're basically just recording the item, and so that we want to reflect the item in the budget as well. And so, absent that, in some cases, we're not going to be able to spend money in those line items. For example, ABCs, the special revenues, the adopted program, and then the legal fees. So we'll have a lot of line items that we cannot allocate to the line items for legal fees as well. So we will not be able to spend that in accountable at year end as well. So it will impact the operations and our reporting mechanisms that we do at this time of year.
Okay, so revisiting 62A, there is a motion. Is there a second?
She made the motion.
No, I made a motion. Diane seconded. Okay, is there any discussion on 6A2? Do you withheld it, Michael? Is there anything you would like to discuss? We don't have any further questions. Okay. Anything else over here? No? Okay, Ron?
This entire situation, I think it needs to be discussed, that we are actually being asked to approve things that basically someone's already decided should happen, is being able to approve it in advance. And I think that's why the holdup, and I personally would like to make a amended motion to put all of these items off until next month, and then have a meeting of the budget committee beforehand and know what these are, and be able to vote on them next month. Thank you.
Second.
Can you restate your amendment when you say all of these items, Mr. Sumners? Are you talking about items?
The entire 6A2,
6A2?
yes.
So there's an amended motion and a second to postpone the voting on item 6A2 until next month. There can be discussion, and I think the board should hear from the administration on the impact of that.
Well, I'd just like to state that if that motion is ultimately carried out, that there's going to be byproducts of how business is compromised as far as, our financials, but HCDE. Ultimately, if we come to an agreement to pass this action item 30 days from now, we're going to have byproducts of that, because we're not going to be able to pay some of our bills in a timely manner and maintain the positive business model that we've done an exceptional job with up to this point.
That's correct. And August 31st is our year end. And so when auditors come in and look at amended budgets, they look at our year end. And so next month, we basically be already after the end of the year. We'd only be amending fiscal year 16, not fiscal year 15.
The other question I have for you, Dr. Mesqua, is this action item unique or different from any other action item we've had similar to it previously?
The only unique one is the one for the PFC refunding, which that one happened in January. And all the other ones are routine. That's a normal process for the year or for each month. So the only one that's unusual that only happens, every 5 years, is the one for the PFC, which is the refund, due to the refunding that we did in January.
So I would ask the board to please consider passing this action item. And the comments that Mr. Sumners have made, we could certainly take that into consideration and form a committee to do that for the next board meeting. But to make that decision the day of the board meeting, when it ultimately needs approval to maintain our business model, I think perhaps might be impulsive, and we need to probably spend a little bit more time and sort that out before we jump into that just right this second.
I'd like to comment that I took all of this into account when I decided that today was the day that somebody needed to draw the line, and that I was well aware of the impact at the end of the year and of the items that may have to be paid at some later time. But I think it's just time to end the practice of incurring expenditures that require board approval before the board gets to approve them. Putting us in this position of having to pass something just so we can honor our obligations that we've already incurred. So these transfers around are getting large. They're not being discussed or presented to anyone in advance, and I'm just tired of it. So I'm going to vote no regardless of what anybody does.
Mr. Mesco, were these items brought to the board previously where we discussed them?
The refunding was approved by the board in January. That was effective, and that was presented by the board. All the other items are new items that haven't been affected. They're budget amendments. They will affect the future, not the past. The only one that is at that time is the refunding, which is the PFC. All the other ones are budget amendments that will go for the future. Basically, we received the grant and we need to amend the budget for the future. So I don't understand bringing them prior. I mean, they are being brought prior. They're all prior.
Well, just a few minutes ago, you said that you weren't going to be able to make payments unless we passed this.
Right, that's correct. Because
so you've already obligated us for the payments and we haven't passed it yet.
I move to call the question.
Takes a 2/3 vote to call the question.
Okay, we have a request to call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, so,
Discussion may continue.
all right. So my question to you is, the things that we're voting on, or we're asked to vote on this today, partial of the vote of the item was done in January. But then there are things that are new, and we've had this discussion before where there have been things that I voted against, and then later on they come back and they're lumped in with something else, and I can't vote for that because it's lumped in with something else. I think that's always been a problem, where we're combining things that were approved with things that haven't been approved. And so that's a problem. I see that as a problem with what y'all have brought up.
Yeah, but I want to clarify that I don't think that the fact that this is the refunding is on here is of any importance, because it has previously been approved, and it's really on here for information purposes only.
So
Well, all the other amendments